Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The nightmares always started the same way. Darkness, suffocating and thick, followed by a piercing scream that echoed through the void. Kyler jolted awake, his heart pounding in his chest, sweat beading on his forehead. He reached out instinctively, searching for the warmth of Lillian's body beside him, but found only cold, empty sheets. Reality crashed down upon him once more. It had been a year since Lillian's death, yet the pain remained as fresh as the day he'd lost her. Kyler sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair, and glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 3:17 a.m., another sleepless night. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, his bare feet touching the cool hardwood floor. The house was silent, save for the gentle hum of the air conditioner. Kyler padded down the hallway, pausing briefly outside Rachel's room. He cracked open the door, peering inside to check on his sleeping daughter. At 16, she was the spitting image of her mother, a fact that both comforted and pained him. Satisfied that Rachel was sleeping soundly, Kyler made his way to the kitchen. He filled a glass with water from the tap and leaned against the counter, sipping slowly. His gaze drifted to the refrigerator, where a photo of Lillian smiled back at him. It was taken on their last vacation together, her auburn hair tousled by the ocean breeze, green eyes sparkling with joy. "I miss you," Kyler whispered, his voice barely audible. "God, I miss you so much." He set the glass down and walked to the living room, collapsing onto the couch. The house felt cavernous without Lillian's presence, every room a reminder of what he'd lost. Kyler reached for the remote, turning on the TV to fill the silence. He flipped through channels mindlessly, not really watching anything until exhaustion finally overtook him. When he awoke, sunlight was streaming through the windows. Kyler groaned, his neck stiff from sleeping on the couch. He heard movement in the kitchen and the smell of coffee wafted through the air. "Dad?" Rachel called out. "You out here?" Kyler sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, honey, I'm in the living room." Rachel appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. She wore her school uniform, a crisp white blouse and plaid skirt, her long auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail. She handed one of the mugs to Kyler and sat down beside him. "Rough night?" she asked, concern etched on her face. Kyler nodded, taking a sip of the coffee. "Just couldn't sleep. You know how it is." Rachel reached out, squeezing his hand. "I miss her too, Dad." They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Rachel stood up. "I've got to get to school. Will you be okay?" Kyler forced a smile. "Of course. Don't worry about me. Have a good day, sweetheart." After Rachel left, Kyler showered and dressed for work. He was a software engineer, and thankfully his company had been understanding about his need to work from home more often since Lillian's death. He settled at his desk, ready to lose himself in lines of code when something caught his eye. A corner of an envelope was peeking out from beneath a stack of papers. Kyler frowned, not recognizing it. He pulled it out, his breath catching in his throat as he saw the handwriting on the front. Lillian's handwriting. With trembling hands, Kyler opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. "My dearest Kyler, if you're reading this, it means something has happened to me. I pray that day never comes, but I've learned the hard way that life rarely goes according to plan. There's so much I need to tell you, things I should have said years ago. The truth is, Kyler, the woman you married, Lillian Edwards, she doesn't really exist. Or rather, she didn't exist until 15 years ago. My real name is Emma Blackwood. Before I met you, I was part of a witness protection program. I testified against a dangerous criminal organization, and in return, I was given a new identity and a chance at a new life. I thought I'd left that past behind when I fell in love with you, when we built our beautiful family. But now I fear it may have caught up with me. If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident, Kyler. They found me.
I'm so sorry for keeping this from you. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was afraid. Afraid of losing you, afraid of putting you and Rachel in danger. I hope you can forgive me. There's a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box number 1123. The key is taped to the back of our wedding photo in the bedroom. Inside, you'll find everything you need to know. Please be careful, my love, and please keep our Rachel safe. I love you both more than words can say.
Always, Lillian Emma. Kyler read the letter 3 times, his mind reeling. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of sick joke. But he knew Lillian's handwriting, knew the way she dotted her I's and crossed her T's. This was no forgery. He stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. The police had ruled Lillian's death an accident, a hit and run while she was out for her evening jog. But now everything was different. Kyler's hands shook as he made his way to the bedroom. He took down the framed photo of their wedding day, and sure enough, taped to the back was a small key. He clutched it tightly, his mind racing. He needed to go to the bank, needed to see what was in that safety deposit box. But first, he had to make sure Rachel was safe. Kyler pulled out his phone and dialed her number. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" Rachel answered, the sounds of a busy school hallway in the background. "Yeah, everything's fine," Kyler lied, trying to keep his voice steady.
Listen, sweetie, I need you to come straight home after school today, okay? No stopping anywhere, no hanging out with friends. Can you do that for me? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Dad, what's going on? You're scaring me. Kyler took a deep breath. I promise I'll explain everything when you get home. Just please, Rachel, it's important. Okay, she said hesitantly. I'll come straight home. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Be safe. As soon as he hung up, Kyler grabbed his keys and headed for the door. He needed answers, and he needed them now. The drive to First National Bank felt like an eternity. Kyler's mind raced with questions. Who was after Lillian? What had she witnessed? And how could she have kept this secret for so long? He parked haphazardly in the bank's lot and rushed inside. The teller looked up as he approached, a practiced smile on her face. Good morning, sir. How can I help you today? Kyler pulled out the key, his voice low and urgent. I need to access a safety deposit box, number 1123. The teller's smile faltered slightly at his intensity. Of course, sir. May I see some identification? Kyler fumbled for his wallet, nearly dropping it in his haste. He handed over his driver's license, tapping his foot impatiently as the teller verified his information. Right this way, Mr. Hampton, she said, leading him to a secure room in the back of the bank. Once inside, Kyler inserted the key with trembling hands. The box slid out smoothly, revealing a thick manila envelope and a small leather-bound notebook. He grabbed both, stuffing them into his jacket. Is there anything else you need, sir? The teller asked. Kyler shook his head, already turning to leave. No, thank you. That's all. He practically ran back to his car, his heart pounding. He wanted to tear into the envelope right there, but he knew he needed to be somewhere private, somewhere safe. As he drove home, Kyler's mind wandered to the last time he saw Lillian alive. It was a Tuesday evening, unseasonably warm for October. She'd kissed him goodbye, a playful smile on her lips. Don't wait up, she'd said, lacing up her running shoes. I might be a while. I've got a lot on my mind to sort through. If only he'd known then what those words really meant. If only he'd stopped her from going out that night. Kyler pulled into the driveway, relieved to see Rachel wasn't home yet. He needed time to process whatever was in that envelope before trying to explain it to her. Inside, he spread the contents of the envelope across the dining room table. There were documents, birth certificates, both for Lillian Edwards and Emma Blackwood, news clippings about a major drug bust in Chicago 15 years ago, and photographs, grainy surveillance shots of men Kyler didn't recognize. He opened the leather notebook, recognizing Lillian's neat handwriting. It was a journal, detailing her life before she entered witness protection. Kyler read, his horror growing with each page.
Lillian Emma had been an accountant for a front company owned by the Costello crime family. She'd discovered evidence of money laundering, drug trafficking, and worse. When she'd gone to the FBI, they'd put her in witness protection in exchange for her testimony. But something had gone wrong. The last entry in the journal, dated just days before her death, was chilling. They found me. I don't know how, but they did. I saw one of Costello's men outside Rachel's school yesterday. I can't put my family in danger. I have to end this, one way or another. Kyler felt sick. All this time, he'd believed Lillian's death was a tragic accident. But now he knew the truth. She'd been murdered, and the killers were still out there. He was so engrossed in the documents that he didn't hear the front door open. Rachel's voice startled him. "Dad, what's all this?" Kyler looked up to see his daughter standing in the doorway, her eyes wide as she took in the papers spread across the table. He knew there was no hiding this from her now. "Sit down, sweetheart," he said softly. "There's something I need to tell you about Mom." Over the next hour, Kyler explained everything he'd learned. Rachel listened in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. "So, Mom was killed because of this?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kyler nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, Rachel. I didn't know. If I had—" "What do we do now?" Rachel pulled back, wiping her eyes. There was a determination in her gaze that reminded Kyler so much of Lillian. "We go to the police," Kyler said firmly. "We show them this evidence. They'll have to reopen the case." But as the words left his mouth, doubt crept in. If these people were powerful enough to find Lillian after 15 years in witness protection, how deep did their influence go? Could they trust the police? As if reading his thoughts, Rachel voiced his fears. "Dad, what if they're in on it? What if going to the police puts us in danger?" Kyler ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. He had to protect Rachel, had to finish what Lillian started. But how? "We need help," he said finally. "Someone we can trust, someone with resources." Rachel's eyes lit up. "What about Uncle Marcus? He's a private investigator, right?" Kyler nodded slowly. Marcus had been his best friend since college, and he'd always been there for the family. If anyone could help them navigate this safely, it was him. "Good thinking, sweetheart. I'll give him a call." As Kyler reached for his phone, a chill ran down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He moved to the window, peering out at the quiet suburban street. At first, nothing seemed amiss. But then he spotted it. A black SUV parked across the street, its windows tinted. As he watched, the engine started, and the vehicle pulled away slowly. Kyler's heart raced. They were already here. How much did they know? "Rachel," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Pack a bag, essentials only. We need to leave. Now!" Rachel's eyes widened, but she nodded, rushing to her room. Kyler quickly gathered the documents from the table, shoving them into a backpack along with his laptop. As they headed for the car, Kyler's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk about Lillian. Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th. Come alone." Kyler stared at the message, his mind racing. It could be a trap, but it could also be their only lead. He made a split-second decision. "Change of plans," he told Rachel. "I'm dropping you off at Uncle Marcus's. I need to take care of something." Rachel started to protest, but Kyler cut her off. "Please, honey. Trust me. I'll explain everything later." As they drove, Kyler's mind was in turmoil. He was about to dive headfirst into a world he knew nothing about, a world that had already taken Lillian from him. But he had no choice. He needed answers, needed to keep Rachel safe, needed to bring Lillian's killers to justice. The old warehouse loomed before him, a hulking shadow against the setting sun. Kyler parked a block away, his heart pounding. He checked his phone one last time. No messages from Rachel or Marcus. Good. They were safe, at least for now. He approached the warehouse cautiously, every sense on high alert. The area was deserted, the only sound the distant hum of traffic. Kyler pushed open a rusted side door, wincing at the loud creak. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous and dark. Shafts of fading sunlight filtered through broken windows, illuminating swirling dust motes. Kyler's footsteps echoed as he moved deeper into the building. "Hello," he called out, his voice sounding small in the vast space.
"I'm here. Whoever you are, show yourself."
For a moment, there was only silence. Then a figure stepped out from behind a stack of old crates. Kyler's breath caught in his throat. The woman before him was older, her once auburn hair now streaked with gray, but he'd recognize those green eyes anywhere. "Lillian?" he whispered, unable to believe what he was seeing. She shook her head sadly. "Not quite. I'm Caroline Blackwood, Emma's sister, your sister-in-law."
Kyler staggered back, his mind reeling. "But how? Lillian never mentioned a sister." Caroline's expression was grim. "There's a lot, Emma. Lillian? Never told you, but we don't have much time. They're closing in, and I need your help to finish what she started."
Over the next hour, Caroline filled in the gaps in Lillian's story. The sisters had both been caught up in the Costello family's criminal empire, but only Emma had managed to escape into witness protection. Caroline had spent years working undercover, gathering evidence to bring down the organization once and for all. "Emma's death wasn't an accident," Caroline said, her voice tight with emotion. "They found her, but she refused to give up my location."
"She died protecting me, protecting the investigation." Kyler felt a mix of pride and anguish wash over him. Even in her final moments, Lillian had been braver than he could have imagined. "What do you need from me?" he asked, determination replacing his earlier fear. Caroline pulled out a small flash drive. "This contains everything we've gathered over the years. Names, dates, bank accounts, enough to bring down not just the Costellos, but corrupt officials who've been protecting them. I need you to get this to the FBI, to people we can trust." Kyler took the drive, his hand shaking slightly. "Why me? Why not do it yourself?" "Because they're watching me," Caroline said grimly. "I'm blown. But you're an ordinary citizen, a grieving widower. They won't suspect you." As if on cue, the sound of screeching tires came from outside. Caroline's eyes widened. "They're here. You need to go, now. There's a back exit through the loading docks. Don't stop, don't look back." Kyler hesitated. "What about you?" Caroline smiled sadly. "I'll hold them off. Give you time to get away." She pressed a piece of paper into his hand. "This is the contact information for an FBI agent we can trust. Get the drive to her." Before Kyler could protest, the main doors of the warehouse burst open. Men with guns swarmed in, shouting orders. "Go!" Caroline yelled, pushing Kyler towards the back of the warehouse. He ran, heart pounding, the flash drive clutched tightly in his hand. Behind him, he heard gunshots and Caroline's defiant voice. He wanted to turn back, to help her, but he knew he couldn't. He had to complete the mission, had to make Lillian's sacrifice mean something. Kyler burst out of the loading dock doors into the cool night air. He sprinted down alleyways, taking random turns, trying to lose any potential pursuers. Finally, breathless and disoriented, he found himself in a quiet residential area. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands, dialing the number Caroline had given him. A woman's voice answered on the second ring. "This is Agent Reyes." "My name is Kyler Hampton," he said, still trying to catch his breath. "I have information about the Costello family. Lillian Edwards was my wife." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Agent Reyes spoke again, her voice was deadly serious. "Mr. Hampton, listen carefully. I'm sending a team to your location. Stay where you are and don't speak to anyone else. We'll be there in 10 minutes. As Kyler waited, hidden in the shadows of a bus stop, the events of the day washed over him. In the span of hours, his entire world had been turned upside down. The woman he'd loved, the life they'd built together, it had all been built on secrets and danger. But as he clutched the flash drive, Kyler felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced since Lillian's death. He would see this through. For Lillian,
for Rachel, and for justice. The next few days passed in a blur of debriefings, safe houses, and sleepless nights. Kyler and Rachel were placed under protective custody while the FBI acted on the information from the flash drive. Arrests were made, evidence was seized, and the Costello empire began to crumble. Through it all, Kyler found an unexpected source of comfort. In the safe house, among Lillian's old belongings, he discovered a box of her clothes. One sleepless night, driven by grief and a desperate need to feel close to her, he slipped on one of her dresses. The soft fabric against his skin was like an embrace. For the first time since her death, Kyler felt a sense of peace. He began to wear her clothes more often, finding solace in this private ritual. Rachel, showing wisdom beyond her years, accepted this new aspect of her father with open arms.
"If it helps you feel close to Mom," she said, "then I'm glad."
As the case against the Costellos built, Kyler found himself healing. The nightmares became less frequent, replaced by dreams of Lillian, not as she died, but as she lived. Vibrant, loving, strong. Months passed. The trial of the century, as the media dubbed it, began. Kyler testified, telling the world about the brave woman who had sacrificed everything for justice. Rachel sat in the courtroom, holding his hand, her presence a constant reminder of why they were fighting. Finally, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, the verdict came in. Guilty on all counts, the Costello empire was no more. As Kyler and Rachel left the courthouse for the last time, a weight lifted from their shoulders. They could finally begin to move forward, to build a new life while honoring Lillian's memory. "What do we do now, Dad?" Rachel asked as they walked to the car. Kyler smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders.
"We live, sweetheart. It's what your mom would have wanted."
As they drove home, Kyler felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they would face it together. And somewhere, he knew Lillian was watching over them, finally at rest. The sun was setting as they pulled into their driveway, casting long shadows across the familiar landscape of their neighborhood. It felt strange to be back home after so many months away, living in safe houses and hotel rooms. Rachel paused on the front porch, her hand on the doorknob. "It feels different, somehow," she said softly. Kyler nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. They were different now, changed by the truth they'd uncovered and the battles they'd fought. But as he looked at their home, he felt a surge of determination. This was still their sanctuary, their place of love and memories. They would reclaim it, make it theirs again. As they stepped inside, Kyler was struck by how everything looked exactly as they'd left it that fateful day months ago. Lillian's favorite throw blanket was still draped over the arm of the couch. Her coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, waiting for a morning that would never come. Rachel moved through the house slowly, trailing her fingers along familiar surfaces. She paused at the mantel, picking up a framed photo of the three of them from happier times. "Do you think we'll ever feel normal again?" she asked, her voice small. Kyler wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close.
"I don't know if we'll ever be the same kind of normal we were before," he said honestly. "But we'll find a new normal. Together."
That night, after Rachel had gone to bed, Kyler found himself standing in front of Lillian's closet. He ran his hands over her clothes, remembering how each piece had looked on her. The red dress she'd worn on their anniversary, the soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes. Almost without thinking, he slipped on one of her silk nightgowns. The fabric whispered against his skin, and he closed his eyes, imagining Lillian's arms around him. In the months that followed, Kyler and Rachel slowly rebuilt their lives. There were good days and bad days, moments of laughter and times of tears. They went to therapy, both individually and together, working through their grief and trauma. Kyler continued to find comfort in wearing Lillian's clothes. It started as a private nighttime ritual, but gradually he began incorporating pieces into his daily wardrobe. A scarf here, a blouse there. Each item felt like a connection to Lillian, a way of keeping her close. At first, he worried about what others might think, but to his surprise, he found a supportive community. Online forums and local support groups introduced him to others who used clothing as a means of processing grief or exploring their identity. Rachel, true to her nature, was his biggest supporter. She even helped him shop for new clothes that blended his own style with the feminine touches he'd come to love. "You seem happier, Dad," she said one day as they sorted through a pile of new purchases. "More you." Kyler smiled, touched by her insight.
I feel more like myself, he admitted. Like I'm honoring your mom's memory while also discovering new parts of who I am. As the 1-year anniversary of the trial approached, Kyler received an unexpected call from Agent Reyes. "Mr. Hampton," she said, her voice warm. "I hope this isn't an intrusion, but I wanted to check in. How are you and Rachel doing?" Kyler was surprised by the genuine concern in her voice. Over the course of the investigation and trial, he'd come to respect Agent Reyes, but he hadn't expected her to keep in touch. "We're doing better," he said. "Taking it day by day. How about you? I imagine bringing down an entire crime syndicate keeps you busy." Agent Reyes chuckled. "It certainly does, but that's actually why I'm calling. We're organizing a ceremony to honor those who helped bring the Costellos to justice. We'd like you and Rachel to attend if you're comfortable with that." Kyler hesitated. The idea of revisiting that chapter of their lives was daunting. But then he thought of Lillian, of her bravery and sacrifice. "We'll be there," he said firmly. The ceremony was a solemn affair, held in a grand hall filled with law enforcement officials, politicians, and families of victims. Kyler and Rachel sat in the front row, listening as speakers recounted the years-long battle against the Costello Empire. When it was Kyler's turn to speak, he stood at the podium, acutely aware of all eyes on him. He wore one of Lillian's favorite blouses under his suit jacket, drawing strength from it. "My wife, Lillian Edwards, or as some of you knew her, Emma Blackwood, was the bravest person I've ever known," he began. "She sacrificed everything to protect others, to fight for justice. But she was more than just a witness or a victim. She was a loving wife, a devoted mother, and a beacon of light in this world." As Kyler spoke, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. This was Lillian's legacy, not the secrets or the danger, but the love and courage she'd shown every day. After the ceremony, as they mingled with other attendees, Kyler was approached by a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Mr. Hampton, I'm Diana Chen. I worked with your wife, with Emma, years ago before she entered witness protection." Kyler shook her hand, curious. "It's nice to meet you, Miss Chen. Did you know her well?" Diana nodded, her eyes misting over. "She was my best friend. We lost touch when she had to disappear, but I never forgot her. I just wanted you to know. She talked about you even back then. She said meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to her." Kyler felt a lump form in his throat. "Thank you," he managed. "That means more than you know." As they drove home that night, Rachel reached over and squeezed Kyler's hand. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said softly. "And I know Mom would be too." Kyler smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. They had survived the storm, emerged stronger on the other side. And while the pain of losing Lillian would never fully fade, he knew now that it was possible to honor her memory while also embracing the future. In the weeks that followed, Kyler found himself thinking more about the future than he had in years. He started considering a career change, wanting to use his experience to help others who had been through similar traumas. He enrolled in online courses in psychology and victim advocacy, throwing himself into his studies with a passion that surprised him. Rachel, now in her senior year of high school, was supportive of his new direction. "It suits you," she said one evening as they sat at the dining room table, Kyler surrounded by textbooks. "You've always been good at helping people." As Kyler immersed himself in his new studies and continued to explore his evolving identity, he found an unexpected ally in Agent Reyes.
She became a mentor of sorts, offering guidance on navigating the complex world of victim advocacy and law enforcement cooperation. It was during one of their regular coffee meetings that Agent Reyes broached a subject Kyler hadn't considered. "Have you thought about dating again?" she asked gently. Kyler nearly choked on his latte. "Dating? No, I haven't really thought about it." Agent Reyes smiled understandingly. "It's okay if you're not ready, but from what I've seen, you've come a long way in your healing. It might be worth considering." The idea stuck with Kyler, niggling at the back of his mind. He discussed it with his therapist, who encouraged him to take things slowly, but not to close himself off to the possibility of finding love again. It was Rachel who finally gave him the push he needed. "Mom would want you to be happy, Dad," she said one evening, "and so do I." With trepidation, Kyler created a profile on a dating app. He was honest about his past, about his journey with grief and self-discovery. To his surprise, he received several interested messages. His first date in over 17 years was with a kind-hearted art teacher named Michael. As Kyler got ready, selecting a flowing top and slim-fit pants that made him feel confident, he felt a mix of excitement and guilt.
"It's okay to move forward,"
he told his reflection in the mirror, imagining Lillian's encouraging smile. The date went better than Kyler could have hoped. Michael was understanding about Kyler's past and supportive of his journey. They talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. As weeks turned into months, Kyler found himself opening up more, not just to Michael, but to life in general. He threw himself into his studies, excelling in his courses. He became more involved in support groups for grieving spouses and LGBT individuals, finding a sense of community he hadn't realized he was missing. Rachel thrived as well, accepted to her dream college with a full scholarship. As they toured the campus together, Kyler felt a bittersweet pride. His little girl was growing up, ready to embark on her own adventures. "Mom would be so proud of you," he told her as they stood in the quad, surrounded by bustling students. Rachel smiled, her eyes shining. "She'd be proud of both of us, Dad." On the anniversary of Lillian's death, Kyler and Rachel visited her grave together. They brought her favorite flowers and spent the afternoon sharing memories and laughter. As the sun began to set, Kyler placed a hand on the cool stone of Lillian's headstone. "We're okay, my love," he whispered. "We're more than okay. We're living just like you would have wanted." Driving home, Kyler felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The road ahead was still uncertain, full of challenges and new experiences, but he was ready to face it, with Rachel by his side and Lillian's memory in his heart. As they pulled into the driveway, Kyler saw Michael waiting on the porch, a warm smile on his face. Rachel gave her father's hand a squeeze before heading inside, leaving the two men alone. Kyler approached Michael, feeling a flutter of happiness in his chest.
"Thank you for being here today,"
he said softly. Michael pulled him into a gentle embrace.
"Always,"
he murmured. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.